Welcome back, everyone, to Pontos Fathom Press. This is our Pontos Fathom podcast. It's our fourth week talking about the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, podcast number 11. And today we're going to go into the concept of politic versus prophetic, right? The politics versus the prophetics, right? So the idea here is Philip K. Dick. It's a lot of things to many people, but one thing that we find in his exegesis is a sort of wrestling between the Berkeley sci-fi author who has a sharp political commentary on social issues. You know, he's among the drug addicts, among the mentally ill kind of things, among the disenfranchised, against the man, against the machine. There's a whole political side of California, Berkeley, Philip K. Dick, political, off-world on Mars, human society issues. We'll talk a little bit about Freud, civilization discontents. But then on the other side, we have this prophetic side of Dick, right? So you've got his political side, which seems mostly secular in commenting on as technology grows and social structures give us existential dread, for example, something like this. But you flip to the prophetic side of Dick, and this is where he's a sci-fi author, and I'm kind of punning on sci-fi here because it's very psychological, and it's very psychosis and psychotic in some ways. So this sci-fi prophet Dick, who comes out in buckets in the exegesis, stripping down reality. What's really going on? What are these strange functions? How is it that, I was just thinking of Walter Benjamin. I flipped open the book, and there in the editor's notes, someone else had thought about Walter Benjamin. Maybe we just came to the same conclusion. This book is like a mad tornado of this sci-fi effect, right? So, and I think no better work tries to encapsulate this cross chatter between the left and right hemispheres, so to speak, to use the language from Scanner Darkly, than Valis. Okay, so we'll kind of go into the exegesis a bit. We'll go into Valis a bit. Maybe we'll start out with a quick reading here. I prepared some notes around history. So let's kind of talk about history in Valis. And we're talking here where it says, Scanner is a very serious book. Man presents unredeemed state. His ontological condition of ignorance is depicted. It's not an aspect of his state. Opposed to this is an ontological state of knowledge, knowing provided by Runseter and Ubik. Scanner focuses on the condition of ignorance, dealt with more glibly in Ubik and Mays. It goes on to anatomy of the occlusion. It really studies nothing else. No cosmology is prevented. Mainly it strives to show that we are fucked up in a way that preserves our being aware of it. It needs to point out the one-sided intervention. Valis was an attempt to show the intervention and the redeemed state, but it's proving too difficult to write. The novel must be written, and I have redeemed state of 274, 275 to base it on. But God, what a task, to depict 1, that which redeems, 2, the process of redemption, 3, the redeemed, restored state of man, in contrast to the occluded state as described in Scanner. So just skipping ahead here, you have, like the Siddhartha Part 2 book I dreamed about, restored man, the Christ man, the second Adam. What a responsibility. What a task, but a task that must be done. So later here he talks about what makes me think of this furious rate of permutation of the phosphine graphics was the entire remainder of the karmic tape run. What could it have been? Ignorance can be thought of as forgetting the true self. And he goes on here to talk about the idea of here he causes, okay, so voice, let's go right here. I had a dream, and here's a voice. So no time, in fact, when I realized in 274 voice. This is also why he smashes things. The creator James is meant in both cases to make time seem real. But in 274, I discovered time, it's not real. He causes things to look different, so it appear that time has passed. This is why Rome circa AD 45 and USA circa 1974 are syntonic. They can be superimposed. Otherwise, there is no possible way, and no way upon seeing it, to comprehend it. Here's the answer. Appear time has passed. See? He's talking counterfeiting eternity, trying to duplicate it as an end to itself. It's a fraud. Now here, this is what's interesting about this. Here we have compressed in one paragraph both aspects of our topic today. We have this one small paragraph saying, history repeats itself in a way, right? In a political way, right? The same ills, earlier in our last podcast, we referenced fascist USA or Soviet totalitarianism, right? As overlapping politics in a way like all systems go toward a corruption, right? What we kind of see here is at the one level, it's a political talk. It's the idea of, history of Rome is the history of USA. But that's not exactly what he's saying. He's saying they actually are overlapping. Now, perhaps that's just that schizophrenic axis that we talked about a couple podcasts ago, where he talked about the Gothic vaulted cathedral of time, right? Where, you start seeing the layers of things, and then suddenly he's able to see parallels in Rome and U.S. I mean, I had a Roman professor, J. Rufus Fears, in my classics studies days, and he was a great proponent of not something like this. He was just saying, well, history repeats itself. And if we look at the fall of the Roman Empire, we can see parallels to the 1980s, the 1990s, and where we are today, along a similar slippery slope of degradation of quality society, right? So I think that's a very different politics statement than saying the world is a Gnostic black iron prison, right? So let's kind of go into Valis a little bit here. And before we jump into Valis, I just wanted to call out just two kind of terms of Dick's that will pull from the exegesis here. One would be the black iron prison, or B.I.P. Dick's term for the prison world of political tyranny and determinism he glimpsed beneath the veneer of Orange County in March 1974. He later wrote, upon perceiving it, that he realized he had been living it and writing about it his whole life. In his dualistic cosmologies, the B.I.P. is opposed to the palm tree garden, or the PTG. We can go check out the PTG too, but I want to instead go to another concept here. We'll look at the PTG. PTG is Palm Tree Garden, the spiritually redeemed and ontologically genuine world, revealed to Dick in January-February 75, when Southern California seemed to transform itself into the Levant. In Chapter 18 of Dies Irae, co-written with Roger Zelensky, the vision of Dr. Abernathy, written by Dick alone, represents the Palm Tree Garden. Right, so we see that, and then the other one I was going to show is just the idea of Valis. Valis is the acronym coined by Dick based on the phrase vast, active, living, intelligent system. Okay, so let's talk about his LSD-like approach to the Psy-fi by jumping into some readings from Valis. First of all, I selected, he calls out Freud here, and we'll get to Freud in a bit too. So Dr. Stone, note they paid Dr. Stone to figure out what they had destroyed. Insidiously, the pain filled him up and split him in half right down the middle. The task of the staff, and even the other patients, was to put the person back together, but this could not be done as long as the bullet remained. All the lesser therapists did was note the person split into two pieces and begin the job of patching him back into a unity. But they failed to find and remove the bullet. The fatal bullet fired at the person was the basis of Freud's original attack on the psychologically injured person. Freud had understood. He had called it a trauma. Later on, everyone got tired of searching for the fatal bullet. It took too long. Too much had to be learned about the patient. Dr. Stone had a paranormal talent, like his paranormal Bach remedies, which were a palpable hoax, a pretext to listen to the patient. Rum with a flower dipped in it, nothing more, but a sharp mind hearing what the patient said. Dr. Leon Stone turned out to be one of the more important people in horse lover Fats' life. To get to Stone, Fat had to nearly kill himself physically, matching his mental death. I wonder where Leon Stone practices now. And then Stone gave Fat the typescript material from the Nag Hammadi Codex. Right, so this is the Nag Hammadi, as you guys know, is the books that weren't in the New Testament or somewhere in the New Testament, a big cache of books that were found. And Dick goes on about this a lot in Exegesis. Yet regarding benign people in microform as God, the point should be considered. Fat had a high regard for God. And if the Logos was rational and the Logos equaled God, then God had to be rational. And this is why the fourth gospel statement about the identity of the Logos is so important. And maybe we can just jump to that while we're here. Here's the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was a Logos, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was the same with the beginning of God. All things were made by him, and without him not anything made was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Right? There was a man sent from God whose name was John. The same came from a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men thought that he might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness to that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man and cometh into the world. Right? And this is where Jesus comes in. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came from Jesus Christ. Right? I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, John Baptist says. Make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah. Right? So we jump back to Vallis. If the Logos was rational and the Logos equaled God, then God had to be rational. That's why the fourth gospel statement about the identity of Logos is so important. Kai theos en ho logos, which is to say, and the Word was God. In the New Testament, Jesus said that no one had seen God but him. That is Jesus Christ, the Logos of the fourth gospel. And if to be correct, what Fat experienced was the Logos. We shall be like him. We shall see what he is really like. Okay, so now let's skip ahead here in Vallis a bit to later on in the book. The next step in the one, so he's talking about the one here, right? So he's talking about yin yang, he's talking about the one, Parmenides and the one, and then the twin. The next step in the one's plan was that the two would become the many through the dialectic interaction. From that, hyper-universes are projected a hologram-like interface, which is the pluriform universe we creatures inhabit. The two sources were to intermingle equally in maintaining our universe. That was the one's purpose in our hologrammatic universe. The psyche of Hyperverse 1 set in motion. This is the origin of entropy, undeserved suffering, chaos and death, as well as the empire, the black iron prison. In essence, the aborting of the proper health and growth of life forms within the hologrammatic universe. Also the teaching function, which grossly impaired, since only the signal from the hyper-universe I was information rich, and that from two had become noise. Wow. Okay, so Vallis starts to take horse lover Fats into the heart of the matter, right? We start to see this segmentation, right? And some of this gets into that Psy-fi space that I talk about. So the idea is, on the one hand, we can just see the disenfranchisement with empire, right? The disenfranchisement with everything is like a spiritual prison, we'll say. We can see people are kept dumb, right? People are lied to. These are all B.I.P political topics. But if we get to that, and we'll almost call it this extreme paranoia case, or the enlightened prophetic case of the sci-fi topics, which are like the world is not what it seems. Maybe it's the Gnostic. Maybe the Book of John is right? Maybe this is a Gnostic nightmare. Maybe the very nature of all the material universe is because of these revelatory concepts that he's now trying to explore and redeem and unpack through the exegesis, through his writing. And this is where Dick realizes all of his writing has sort of been about this very deep topic. Well, he's not alone here. We listened to Freud come up briefly. Let's just talk about Freud real quickly, mainly civilization and discontents, but also the future of illusion. So in Future of Illusion, there's a paragraph here I wanted to read, which I believe kind of gets us right to the thick of this, where it's coercion in civilization, right? One would think that a reordering of human relations should be possible, which should remove the sources of dissatisfaction with civilization by renouncing coercion and the suppression of the instincts, so that the undisturbed internal discord, men might devote themselves to the acquisition of wealth and its enjoyment. This would be a golden age, right? But here we see, and as we mentioned Freud in the past, the Lacanian concept of lack, we talked about in our dystopia, where there's a bit of a desire for lack, right? We miss, it's like the Plato's cave, missing the chains, maybe, who knows? Hey guys, by the way, please leave a comment below. I know I'm kind of monologuing here, but definitely would like to hear your takes on it. If you guys have got some videos, would like to share those out here. Also, want to do this as a live podcast, so help me to grow the audience here. Let's share this. We'll start the conversation down in the chat. We can also take it over to Patreon, and eventually I'd like to do these, if you guys are up for it, as live broadcasts. Get a chat going with people interested in similar topics. We can post the reading schedule ahead and do some of those things together. So looking forward to doing that. So anyway, back to Future of an Illusion. The psychological fact has a decisive importance for our judgment of human civilization. Whereas we might find at first that its essence lies in controlling nature for the purpose of acquiring wealth, and that the dangers which threaten it could eliminate through the suitable distribution of that wealth among men. It now seems that the emphasis has moved from the material to the mental. The decisive question is whether and to what extent it is possible to lessen the burden of the instinctual sacrifices imposed on men, to reconcile men to those which must necessarily remain to provide a compassion for them. It is impossible to do that without control of the masses by a minority, and it is as to dispense with coercion the work of civilization. For masses are lazy and unintelligent. They have no love for institutional renunciation, and they are not to be convinced by argument of its inevitability. And so here we kind of get Freud talking a bit about how the coercive nature of something, say, like religion, as a society-shaping force, is part of that big ongoing cycle. So let's take it back to Dick again. So Dick talks about in his discussion here about, we were talking about politic versus prophetic, okay? So on the prophetic side, it is easy to look at it as the B.I.P, a Gnostic nightmare, fallen world. Definitely we don't understand a lot of that stuff. But from a pure politic point of view, there is a shameful boom and bust cycle going on with the rise and fall of empires, right? And that those periods of it's sort of like The Foundation by Asimov talks about this. And even Dune talks about it to some extent, right? So in Dune, the civilizations rise and then plunge into these dark ages as a retrenching of the values. Like the dark ages become a retrenching of values. The doomsday of redistribution, right? One of the side effects of the William of Hastings conquering of England was all the landholders were uprooted, right? So there's a huge, massive distribution, a reevaluation of values. I mean, these are purely politic in a way, because they come out of the spoils of war and empires rising and falling. But at the same time, if you take it on that prophetic view, man will keep doing these kinds of things. So you have on the one hand the idea of religion as a way to control the masses, like Freud is sort of mentioning civilization requires some common civilization. And those things will definitely have patterns to them. On the other hand, what if the whole thing is a rig? What if it's rigged? So again, we get to, maybe we jump here quickly to just Burroughs talking in Nova Express. I wonder if the writers of the Blade Runner 2049 used K9 as a reference to Burroughs' Nova Express. Nova Express came up in our last podcast with Dick. Talked about, in the Exegesis, Dick talks about the Nova police was an example of Burroughs kind of getting it right. But I just wanted to read this one quickly. It said, shift coordinates points. K9 was in combat with the alien mind screen. Magnetic claws feeling for virus punch cards, pulling into the vertiginous spins. Back, stay out of those claws, shift coordinate points. By Town Hall Square, long stop for the red light. A boy stood in front of the hot dog stand and blew water from his face. Pieces of gray vapor drifted back across the wine glass. Sick dawn whisper of clock hands and brown hair. K9 moved back to the combat area. Standing now in the Chinese use sent the resistance machine jolting, clicking, ticking through the pinball machine. Enemy plans burst in the burst of rapid calculation. Clicking in punch cards of redirected orders. Crackling shortwave static. Bleep. Sounds of thinking metal. Calling partitions of all nations. Word falling. Photo falling. Break through the gray room. Pinball led streets. Free doorways. Shift coordinate points. No good, no bueno, hustling myself, such wisdom and guts. The ticket that exploded posed little time, so I'll say good night. Pieces of gray Spanish flu wouldn't photo, like the wind in the green neon. You at the dog, the street blue rain. You want a cup of tea with rose wallpaper, the dog turns. So many and so. I progress. I'm mapping a photo. Light verse of wounded galaxies at the dog I did. The street blue rain. The dog turns. Break through the gray room. He was gone away through invisible morning, leaving a million tape recorders of his voice behind, fading into the cold spring air pose of a colorless question. Right? So we see that emergence there of the sci-fi again, right? When you slip into that sci-fi mode, you can kind of get these resonances there of the politics. But again, like one of the places that psychology comes in is to give us some framework of how we are to exist in the space of this, right? So we have religion as one of our tools. We have psychology as a tool, right? I believe it was back to Freud talking about civilization and its discontents. And again, civilization and discontents, we talked about this one before. How can civilization, which cured so many human problems, right, be also the source of so many of our modern day anxieties, right? And no one better than Dick represents a man torn into a prophetic frenzy by his reactions to and observations from those anxieties, right? So if we jump into this, I believe the line of thought which seeks to trace the phenomena of cultural development, the part played by a superego, promises still further discoveries. I hasten to come to a close, but there is one question which I can hardly evade. If the development of civilization has such a far-reaching similarity to the development of the individual, if it employs the same methods, may we not be justified in reaching the diagnosis that, under the influence of cultural urges, some civilizations, or some epochs of civilization, possibly the whole of mankind, have become neurotic? An analytic dissection of such neuroses might lead to therapeutic recommendations, which could lay claim to great practical interest. So, wow. So here again, he's talking about the psychosis of civilization. Well, again, prophetics isn't a mad Gnostic God creating an insane world separated from Sophia with only Logos as an external force that comes down to save us. Isn't that the neurosis that Freud's talking about? So he just wraps up, says, the fateful question for the human species seems to me to be whether and to what extent their cultural development will succeed in mastering the disturbance of their communal life by the human instinct of aggression and self-destruction. It may be in that time that this respect precisely the precise time deserves a special interest. Man have gained control over the forces of nature to such an extent that with their help they would have no difficulty in exterminating one another to the last man. They know this, and hence comes a large part of their current unrest, their unhappiness, and their mood of anxiety. And now it is to be expected that the others of the two heavenly powers, external Eros, which will make an effort to insert himself in the struggle with his equally immoral adversary. But who can foresee with success and what result? Okay? So again, we come back to Valis, and here we're going to just jump ahead to small passage near the end. Yeah. On our nature, it is proper to say we appear to be the memory coils, DNA carriers capable of experience in a computer-like thinking system which, although we have correctly recorded and stored thousands of years of experiential information, and each of us possesses somewhat different deposits from all the other life forms, there is a malfunction, a failure of memory retrieval. There lies the trouble of our particular subcircuit. Salvation through gnosis, or more properly, amnesis, the loss of amnesia, although it has individual significance for each of us, a quantum leap in perception, identity, cognition, understanding, world and self-experience, including immortality, it has the greater and further importance for the system as a whole, inasmuch as the memories are data needed by it and valuable by it to its overall functioning. Therefore, it is the process of self-repair, which includes rebuilding our subcircuit via linear and orthogonal time changes. The external information or gnosis, then, consists of disinhibiting instructions with the core content actually intrinsic to us. That is already there, first absorbed by Plato, viz. The learning is a form of remembering. The learning is a form of remembering. The primordial source of all our religions lies with the ancestors of the Dogon tribe, who got their cosmogony and cosmology directly from the Three-Eyed Invaders who visited long ago. The Three-Eyed Invaders are mute and deaf telepaths. They could not breathe our atmosphere. But the elongated, misshapen skull of Akhenaten and emanated from a planet in the star system Sirius. Although they had no hands, they had instead pincer claws, as a crab. They were great builders, and they covertly influenced our history toward a fruitful end. Well, this here sounds very much so like a Lovecraftian call, almost to speak. And I believe here we have, let me just check out the image from last week's. I want to show a very interesting image. I think we showed it last week, and suddenly there's a synchronicity here that I think we should exploit. The image of this three-eyed invader. We shared it last week. You guys can check the old video. Go back and check the video. I don't have it handy here, but it was a dream of a tree-like thing with three eyes. 1, 2, 3 eyes. And yeah, so it's definitely strange, right? So again, wrapping everything up, we have Valis. What do you guys think? What's the part of Dick that's a political thinker? And what's the part of Dick that's a Gnostic thinker? And are they mutually exclusive? I mean, is it Is it possible to see him as both? Would love to hear your comments below, and really interested in continuing the dialogue. We will come back to Dick's questions. Next month, I want to do a tour through the thinking of Rudolf Steiner, so we'll lean more on that prophetics side of things. And I definitely think that would be really interesting to everyone. I'm going to end here just with a final call out to the Syzygy and to Atman and Brahma. So he says here, so I am Valis, I am not Valis. Right? I experienced Valis, it entered my own brain and became a universe, an external universe. The self